Within you, there's a fracture that you're aware of. Despite masking it with courteous grins or the semblance of a well-put-together life you display to others, internally, there's an injury that continues to seep. A void persists that no one has been able to satisfy. Though unspoken, you sense it each time someone regards you with warmth and you find it hard to believe. Each time someone draws near and you feel the urge to retreat. There's a segment of yourself you've learned to conceal, not out of fear, but for endurance. But now pay close attention. That concealed segment holds the answer to everything. That injury isn't coincidental. It has an identity. It has a beginning, and it commences much earlier than you suppose. It begins with the initial pulses of your emotional being. It begins with your mother. It's not about accusing her. It's not about portraying her as the antagonist. It's about comprehending that deep within your mind there's an internal, maternal figure that quietly influences your relationships, your uncertainties, your limits, your terrors. Carl Jung referred to her as the archetypal mother. She isn't the physical woman who nurtured you, but the symbolic embodiment you formed of her. That embodiment, that shadow, that emotional resonance is what ensnares you. The maternal injury doesn't always leave noticeable marks. At times, it conceals itself in irrational choices, in unsuccessful relationships, in the incapacity to decline without feeling remorse. It surfaces when you opt for individuals who treat you as you've learned you merit. It surfaces when you penalize yourself for minor errors, as if each misstep were the ultimate evidence of your inadequacy. And the most paradoxical aspect is that you mature believing you're the issue. You think you're overly sensitive, overly intense, overly needy. But you never ponder, what if these injuries are a rational reaction to a love that was never unconditional? Because indeed, often, the love you received wasn't a present. It was a negotiation. They cherished you when you behaved. They praised you when you were beneficial. They disregarded you when they required you to be feeble. And in your youthful innocence, you accepted it as reality, as doctrine. And that doctrine accompanies you everywhere, in every romantic involvement, in every camaraderie, in every professional exchange. You endeavor to replicate the pattern because it's all you're familiar with. Because a part of you believes that if you can make someone genuinely love you, you can rectify the past. But that never succeeds because the past isn't something to be rectified. It's to be confronted. It's to be comprehended and surpassed. Jung was aware of this. He understood that the human spirit doesn't mend with logical clarifications. It mends with symbolism, with integration, with an inner expedition. It mends when you cease projecting your injury onto others and dare to confront it. And indeed, it's agonizing, it's excruciatingly painful, but it also emancipates. The maternal injury isn't a contemporary notion, it's ancient. It's the bedrock of numerous myths, tragedies, and narratives, because the mother is the initial reflection. And if that reflection was shattered, the image it mirrored back to you was also distorted. That's why you question yourself. That's why you require constant affirmation from others. That's why rejection petrifies you as if it were a death verdict. But now arrives the crucial part. Now arrives the revelation. You don't require anyone to rescue you. You don't require an ideal mother to mend the harm. You need to embody your own maternal figure. You need to acquire the ability to provide yourself with what you were denied, to nurture yourself as no one ever nurtured you, to converse with yourself using the gentleness you never experienced, because solely you can re-author your narrative. And here arrives the process of individuation. Jung discussed it as the voyage of the inner champion, the route of assimilating all your facets, the luminous and the obscure, the conscious and the unconscious. It's not superficial self-assistance, it's an internal upheaval. It's introspecting and declaring, "This belongs to me. This injury is mine. And it's also my duty to mend it. Not to absolve your mother, but to emancipate yourself. And that process necessitates instruments. It necessitates tranquility, curative writing, consciousness, emotional fortitude. It's not a swift or cozy journey, but it's authentic, it's metamorphic, and it's essential because as long as you don't mend that injury, you will persist in attracting diverse manifestations of the same anguish. You will persist in constructing relationships where you feel insignificant, where you must merit love as if it were a reward, where any indication of affection appears dubious. And that is not existence, it's enduring on an emotional combat zone that isn't yours. The maternal injury is hushed but incessant. It's the voice that insists you're insufficient, that you should have been dissimilar, that if they don't cherish you, it's your fault. And you believe it because that voice resonates with a tone you've recognized since childhood. But there exists another voice, one that has been muted for too long, one that asserts, "I'm exhausted from this encumbrance. I'm prepared to relinquish it. I am ready to perceive myself anew." And when that voice commences to amplify, something shifts. You commence discerning the patterns. You commence establishing boundaries. You commence conversing with yourself as you would with a frightened child, with empathy, with resolve, with affection. That is the inception. That is the gateway. There are no shortcuts. There is only veracity. And veracity, even if it's painful, is the sole element that can liberate you. Many opt to disregard it, to live in distraction, to persist in blaming others. But you are not here by chance. You are heeding this because a part of you is already prepared to cease reiterating, prepared to forge something novel. You don't need to possess all the solutions. You only need to accomplish one task: introspect. That's where everything resides, not in literature, not in miraculous remedies, not in spiritual leaders. Within you, there exists a version of yourself that doesn't crave approval, that doesn't kneel for affection, that doesn't implore for scraps. That version is enshrouded in layers of apprehension, but it exists and awaits your discovery. Healing is not a terminus, it's a daily resolution. It's opting repeatedly not to exist according to injuries that aren't yours. It's pardoning without excusing. It's embracing without surrendering. It's adoring without self-sacrifice. And above all, it's recollecting that your narrative isn't inscribed in stone. You can re-author it. You can transmute every scar into a guide that steers you back to yourself. Because when you mend the maternal injury, not only do you transform, but your lineage also transforms. What you bequeath to the world transforms. The destiny of those who follow transforms. And that, my companion, is the authentic heritage. Don't halt now. Introspect. Embrace the anguish. Seize it. Articulate it. And liberate it. Because what you don't mend reiterates, but what you assimilate transmutes. And you are here to transmute it all. But there's an aspect seldom discussed regarding the maternal injury, something so disconcerting, so profound, that we prefer to avert our gaze. Yet it's unavoidable if you genuinely aspire to metamorphose. The dread of resembling her. Yes, that silent yet persistent dread. That vertigo that emerges when you catch yourself reiterating phrases, gestures, or attitudes that once pained you. You didn't desire to. You vowed. You despised it. And yet, on an ordinary day, you hear yourself. And you recognize that voice isn't yours, it's hers. And that's when you grasp that the injury not only impacted you, but also molded you. It silently sculpted you. It impelled you to cultivate a defensive, inflexible, hyper-adapted persona. You constructed your identity not from aspiration, but from reaction. You weren't authentic. You were what you believed you had to be to endure. And that's what pains the most, because healing isn't merely lamenting what you lacked. It's acknowledging that much of your being has been a frantic endeavor to shield yourself. Do you comprehend the implication? Your manner of loving, establishing boundaries, seeking assistance, trusting wasn't born freely. It was born conditioned, trained, tamed by an emotional infancy where affection had to be merited, where love was a refuge, a currency. And how do you mend that? With unvarnished candor. Observing yourself, heeding yourself, catching yourself in the act each time you reiterate the script that pained you. Not to chastise yourself, but to interrupt it, to inscribe a new one. And here arrives something pivotal. The maternal injury isn't transcended by evading it. It's mended when you traverse it. When you cease denying its sway, when you sit before it and declare, yes, you marked me, but you don't define me. And no, it's insufficient to pardon. It's insufficient to comprehend. You must re-educate yourself emotionally. You must re-inscribe yourself from the corporeal, from the spirit, from the symbolic. Desire a tangible example? Observe your relationships. Are you the one selecting them, or is your injury selecting for you? Are you drawn to individuals who nourish you or to those who remind you that you must still validate your worth? Does your manner of loving stem from liberty or from the dread of solitude? It's uncomfortable, I acknowledge, but if you don't pose these inquiries to yourself, you will exist ensnared in an endless reiteration, because the injury not only pains, it reiterates. And when you don't render it conscious, what reiterates isn't the narrative, it's you. This is where many desist, because confronting the truth entails ceasing to blame. And ceasing to blame entails shouldering the burden of your own transformation. And that exhausts. That induces vertigo because you can no longer assert, I am this way because of what they did to me. Now you must declare, I am this way because I haven't done what I need to do yet. And that's not cruel. It's liberating, because finally you restore to yourself the power to choose, the power to reconstruct yourself, the power to return to yourself. The internal maternal figure doesn't vanish, but you can transmute her. You can convert that critical voice into a sagacious voice. You can instruct her to communicate differently. You can instruct yourself to provide what you never obtained. Presence without judgment.
May as well take my heart, Catherine. It's already full of you.
Sacrifice.
Please go.
That is
What is
preparing
what's
yourself,
wrong, my dear?
becoming your own maternal figure again, with one distinction. This time you won't forsake yourself. This time you won't disregard yourself. This time you won't have to merit your own love, because comprehending this alters everything. Your injury isn't your identity, it's your commencement, not your fate. And when you assimilate it, something within you awakens. The inner voice that once punished you now steers you. The body that once bore shame now experiences relief. And the spirit that existed in concealment can now inhabit the present. That is authentic healing, not emotional pretense, not eloquent phrases on social platforms. Healing is the willingness to traverse the dark night of the spirit, to cease existing halfway. And yes, it's painful, but it's more agonizing to exist eternally with an open injury that doesn't even belong to you. This is the juncture when you cease seeking someone to blame. This is the juncture when you opt to be the cause, not the effect. This is the juncture when you comprehend that true liberty isn't severing ties with your past, it's ceasing to obey it. Are you prepared? Because healing isn't a passive deed, it's an act of defiance. Defiance against inertia, against the antiquated script. against the echo of what you're no longer. And that echo, if you don't confront it, will submerge you. But if you traverse it, it will transmute you. And within that transformation lies the tranquility you've been pursuing your entire existence. And just when you believe you've comprehended everything, an even more unsettling truth emerges. Often, you're unaware of who you are without your injury. Ponder it. You've existed in that narrative for so long, revolving around that void, that it has become your emotional abode. It's uncomfortable. Yes, it's painful. It confines you, but it's familiar. And human beings, even if they don't confess it, have a perilous addiction to the familiar. That's why it's arduous to relinquish, not because you don't aspire to heal, but because you're uncertain of what lies beyond. Because healing also signifies relinquishing certain invisible advantages. And here arrives an uncomfortable notion, the concealed benefit of pain. Yes, your injury provides you with something. It furnishes you with justifications. It furnishes you with identity. It furnishes you with a narrative. It permits you to assert, I am this way because of what transpired to me. Instead of inquiring of yourself, who could I be if I abandoned all that? And that inquiry is terrifying because it signifies commencing from nothing. It signifies reconstructing yourself without the fractured bricks you inherited, but you can't erect something novel while still defending the ruins. And that is the quandary. Many prefer the suffering they're acquainted with rather than the liberty they don't comprehend, because being truly free isn't comfortable. It's terrifying. Being free signifies having no one to blame. Being free signifies failing without a safety net. Being free signifies not emotionally relying on anyone's validation, not even your past's, and that induces vertigo. But vertigo, if you learn to traverse it, is also the antechamber to flight. Now there's another aspect very few address, the body. Yes, because your injury doesn't solely reside in your mind. It resides in your nervous system, in your posture, in your respiration. Your body learned to safeguard you before you could even articulate. It contracted, froze, hardened. You learned not to inconvenience, not to require, not to exhibit, and you did it with your body. That's why healing the maternal injury also necessitates returning to the body, to inhabit it, to heed it, to liberate it. You can't heal what you don't sense. And you can't sense if you're disconnected from yourself. Mindfulness, conscious respiration, movement, silence, these are simple yet potent instruments because the body doesn't deceive. And often when the mind still denies, the body is already screaming. And here arrives another argument that almost no one dares to broach. Anger. Yes, that forbidden emotion. The one you were instructed to conceal. Because it wasn't pleasant to be angry. Because a good daughter, a good son doesn't complain. They express gratitude, they endure, they remain silent. But anger is a component of healing. It's the fire that propels you to establish boundaries. It's the energy that rescues you from the victim role. It's the emotion that informs you, this wasn't right and I have the right to assert it. Anger isn't the adversary. The adversary is everything you have repressed to appear acceptable. And when you grant that anger space without violence, without guilt, something within you reorganizes. You reclaim power, you reclaim presence. Because healing the maternal injury is also about reclaiming your internal authority, breaking with the compliant child who did everything to be loved and becoming an emotional adult who doesn't have to implore for love. Do you realize the profundity of this? We're not merely discussing a painful childhood experience. We're discussing a psychological structure that has conditioned your perception of the world, of yourself, of your relationships. We're discussing rewriting the fundamental narrative from which you have existed. And that leads you to another crucial point, the inherited emotional silence, that tacit mandate that instructed you not to discuss what pained you, not to question, not to disturb the past. You matured under the law of silence. And now you realize that silence was part of the problem because what is not named festers. What is not spoken is acted out. And what is not healed repeats. That's why speaking, writing, expressing is a form of healing disobedience, not to seek revenge, but to cease carrying what wasn't yours. And here's the final reality check for today. Healing doesn't signify feeling better. It signifies being truer. There are days when it will hurt more, days when it will seem like you're regressing, but even on those days, if you are committed to yourself, you are progressing. Because every time you choose your truth instead of the role imposed on you, you are healing. And it shows. It shows in how you speak, in how you walk, in how you look, in how you decide. It shows because you no longer react the same. You no longer accept just anything. You no longer need so much because you are returning to yourself. Not the you constructed to fit in, but the you who was always beneath it all, waiting to be recognized. And that, believe me, is the bravest you